so many people listening. Like we said, we're talking about admin
Yep.
or office positions, non-field positions. It's intimidating for a lot of people.
Yep.
Where do you find a Gabby? Where do you find a Mary, our other admin assistant? It's very difficult, and because it's intimidating for a lot of people who are like, oh, it's a labor intensive job. It's not traditional
Right.
office job where you're in a cubicle or something like that, or an executive assistant for like a white collar person.
Right.
So it can be a little intimidating. You wrote down 3 things that you say the 3 things, or talk about what you think is like 3 keys to being free in your position, so that when guys are looking to hire this person, how they can set them up for success. Because I do know a lot of people hire that person, and then like 2 months in, it's like a flamed out.
Yeah.
So talk about that.
So one thing that I loved about our interview process is, because I'm a communicator and you communicate as well.
Yeah.
We talked about all of this up front, and what you would give me permission to, what freedom I had, and what the goal would be.
Sure.
So I think 3 things that I would really look at is, when you're hiring someone to come in and look at the internal operations side, giving them space and time. It takes time to really, especially I wasn't involved in the green industry, so I didn't have the information or experience.
Sure.
So giving them time to really look at the business, looking at the holes that exist.
Functionality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's missing? What's already in place? What do we not need to recreate the wheel with?
Right.
And then just having that time. So it's not a quick fix. We're 4 months in and we've made a lot of progress, but it's been a lot of work too.
A lot of work, yeah.
But the first 2 months was really just
slogging through.
It was rough. Just being exposed to a lot of it.
And let me interject here. So in a good way, I think. I created this business. So like my mentor told me, you're trying to fly a plane while you build it.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that, you're trying to just keep the plane afloat.
Yeah.
And as a business owner, you do a lot of things that work for you.
Yep.
That don't necessarily work for an organization.
Exactly.
And I knew that when I hired you, like that was the conversation we had.
Yeah.
But it's like the iceberg thing where you're at the tip of the iceberg and you think you see it, and then you uncover the first level and you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
And it was painful in a good way, like almost like a workout pain.
Yeah.
But yes, like having that precedent and like plate, like here's the plate. Gabby, what foods do you think need to go? And like having that opportunity is so important for people to understand. Like, I think that's the one key I would say as you continue is what works for you doesn't necessarily work for your organization.
Right.
And you have to figure out how people can operate within a system. Like for example, I go on vacation every July with our family to the beach. And in my mind, because the business wasn't burned and crashed to the ground when I got back, we had a good system.
Right.
But just because it worked doesn't mean it's what works best. Like just because you survived doesn't mean we had a real system.
Right.
So you can trick yourself as a business owner a lot of times until you have someone like yourself.
I had to remind myself that the business with us specifically in Trifecta, the business existed for 5 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of things were being done well.
Yeah.
And there was a lot in place that was great.
The bones were good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I had to keep reminding myself of that. But I think with the space and the time, you also gave freedom.
Yeah. Is that the second one?
Yeah. So freedom to make decisions within, a scope with not necessarily needing your approval on everything. But just that freedom to come to you and say, here's what I'm seeing, and start to really press you on the why we do the things that we do. Because we really need to understand what is our goal, what are we trying to communicate, and really how are we going to get there?
Goal, communicate, how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Those 3 great things.
Yeah. And I just think it's really important to have those conversations. The last thing is the hardest thing, and you're doing it. It's been uncomfortable for both of us, but I think any business owner has to be ready to be uncomfortable. You're going to air out dirty laundry. You're going to see, okay, in our situation, for the last 5 years, This is how I've been operating. And all of the junk is going to come to surface.
Sure.
But it has to come to that surface.
Yeah.
And it's also going to be difficult to take your hands out of the pot.
Yeah.
Some people are micromanagers. Some people are not. And then there's always that fine balance where we can partner together.
Yeah.
Let's walk with each other and let's see what this actually looks like.
I've always said, it's like, Chris can tell you this. I've always said, I think the best thing is the analogy of bowling, where you have bumpers.
Yeah.
I think that's
right.
You're not like
that's good.
Holding the ball for the kid and rolling it for him and like every time, but hey, let's put bumpers here, and you're like, let's run free. And if we need to take the bumpers off at some point, then great. But I've always said the bumpers analogy was ideal for someone who's, because like for me, I'm still in like a daily role at the company.
Yeah.
So if I were ever to step out of the daily role and just be like the owner and come to like meetings and stuff like that, I'd even have to have the bumpers now would be off, and now it'd be just free bowling. Yeah. So
those bumpers are systems and processes that are in place. So when you do go on vacation, you don't necessarily have to worry because the system isn't operating out of Alex. It's operating out of who we are and the culture and the organizational processes that we have in place for everyday day-to-day operations.
Right. This is why we suggest to people not to name their company their last name, by the way. You don't know this probably, but we tell people
makes sense
for two reasons. One, if you ever sell it or move on, it's like, oh, it's still your last name. You still this. But two, it creates a mental block for your employees that, oh, I work for Kirby Landscaping.
Right.
And it's not a company, it's I work for a person. And I just think, I don't know about you, I just always feel like that's a mental block for people when they feel like they work for a person specifically. Does that make sense? Instead of an organization? This
is why the onboarding process is so important, because you have to communicate to your employees, this is who we are. Yeah. These are our core values.
Outside of myself.
Right.
We are this outside of myself.
Regardless if Alex Kirby is still the owner of Trifecta.
Right.
This is the core of who we are, and this is why we exist, and this is what we want to accomplish.
Right.
And through that, we need to build that quality so the employees understand. I actually work for a company that does have these core values in place, and we are, for us, changing one property at a time. And so when they do go to those properties, they are making that difference even in the work that they're doing, because it's just the company that we are.
Right.
So that onboarding process has to exist so we can communicate that to the employees.
That's awesome.